I want to chuck a pretty simple question at you today. Picture this. Tonight, the power in your city goes out not because of a storm or just for the Arvo, but for good, never coming back. Where would you head the next morning? Not where you'd want to go, not where you dream of going. Where would you actually end up? Would you knock on someone's door and get invited in? Take your time to think about that. I'm happy to hang around. For a lot of people, there's a long silence after that question. They've got a bag hidden in the cupboard, maybe a rifle, and freeze-dried food that lasts 30 years. They've watched heaps of videos, but still don't have a solid answer. And remember, that question is the whole topic, right? Everything else, the pack, the boots, the water filter, are just footnotes to that main question. Tonight, we'll have a look at both the footnote and the main story together. 'Cause if you can't tell the difference, you'll chuck $1,000 and still end up in strife. So, here's the usual story. When everything goes to shit, whether it's financial, political, or infrastructure-wise, you're meant to have a bug-out bag, usually a 7-2-hour pack, though some reckon 96 hours. It should have a tent, a sleeping bag, a first aid kit, a water filter, and 3 days' worth of freeze-dried food. Also chuck in a multi-tool, a firearm, spare ammo, paracord, and fire-starting gear. Plus, throw in a hatchet, a poncho, a compass, and a small set of tactical reference books. According to the catalogs, the pack should weigh about 40 to 60 pounds. You sling it over your shoulders. You walk out the front door and move to a safe spot. That's the common belief, right? It keeps a massive industry going, shifting heaps of pouches and knives. If you ask them how their gear would go in a real collapse, the sellers just point you to videos of themselves. On a bright Saturday, they're walking through a state park. Imagine this. A bloke, a 60-pound pack, 3 days of tucker, and the bush. Hold up. Here's the problem with that picture. Actually, there's 3 issues. First issue, weight. If you carry 40 pounds tomorrow, how far do you reckon you'll get before your knees give out? According to the U.S. Army's footmarch rules, new soldiers start training with 20% of their body weight for about 5 to 6 miles. Through hikers on the Pacific Crest Trail, people who walk for months just for fun, pack a base weight under 15 pounds. Ray Jardine, a lifelong expert in long-distance walking, carried under 10 pounds. And you, with no training, reckon you're gonna lug 50 pounds. Does that sound right? Second issue, where you're headed. Where exactly are you going with that pack? If there's no specific town, person, driveway, or kitchen table expecting you, then your bag isn't a plan. It's just a bag. And that difference matters. Leaving home without a destination ain't preparation. It's just sightseeing with a heavier suitcase. Third challenge, the terrain. What exactly do you think you'll get done in the bush? 'Cause the real historical evidence, the one missing from those vids, is what matters. Can you see this in every big collapse over the last 200 years or so? City folk didn't just vanish into the bush. They marched down the roads in columns hundreds of thousands strong. Between May and June, 1,940, around 8 to 10 million French and Belgian civilians headed south in front of the German army. They moved along the sealed roads in single file, because that's all the room there was. German Stuka dive bombers came at them from up above. In 1945, something like 12 to 14 million Germans legged it west to get away from the Soviet push. And at least 500,000 died on the way, mostly from the weather, being knackered, or getting sick on the road. None of these blokes were in a forest. They were on a highway with everyone else. And that highway was the cause of all the drama. So the load's too heavy, and there's no destination. The landscape ain't real. What's left of the usual understanding? Bugger all, and that's where we kick off. Come with me into the history books. This is dead set important. Let's start in Rome. Not the big dramatic sacking of Rome in 410, but the long, slow twilight that followed, from about the year 400 to the year 550. A century and a half of slow decline. Under the great emperors, the city of Rome had maybe 800,000 people. By the late 500s, it had maybe 25,000. Have a think about that. It had about 25,000. Let that sink in. A drop of more than 95%. Now, who left in good shape and who left in a bad way? Young Melania was an heiress from a mega-rich family, with dough equal to what 30,000 workers earn in a year. Back around 408, before the Goths showed up at the walls, she and her hubby began flogging their estates and turning their stuff into something they could carry. They moved to Sicily, then pushed on to North Africa and Jerusalem, setting up monasteries as they went, and they kept themselves and their mission safe. Marcella was mates with the smart bloke Jerome. When the Goths turned up in 410 and asked for her gold, she told them she wasn't leaving her place on the Aventine Hill. She pointed to her rough woolen dress, saying she'd already given all her stuff to the poor. The soldiers gave her a hiding, and she passed away from her injuries a few months later. But the real lesson here ain't about being devout. It's about timing and being in the right spot. Melania got out early, spread her dough around the Med, went to places where she knew people and where her cash could do some good. Marcella was brave, but she stuck around and ended up dead. So that's the first pattern. The ones who moved early and went to folk they knew made it through. Now, let's have a look at Germany back in 1923. By November that year, $1 was worth a whopping 4.21 trillion marks. One single loaf of bread cost more than 100 billion marks. Sebastian Hafner, who was a kid in Berlin at the time and later became a journo, wrote about what his dad did. His old man was a top-level public servant who'd get his month's pay and blow the whole lot in a few hours. He'd grab a travel pass, a haircut, and some groceries, 'cause by Arvo that cash would be worth nothing. So, how did the city folk cope? They'd catch trains out to the sticks. They called it the hamster fart, that is, the hoarding run. They'd lug suitcases stuffed with household bits and pieces and swap stuff straight with farmers, like trading a grand piano for a bag of spuds and a silver canteen for a slab of salt beef. Back in 1923, you'd swap a fancy China dinner set for a bit of butter. That's what the exchange rates were really like. After checking out the old records from that time, the Fed in Richmond came to a pretty clear conclusion. Folks out in the sticks who had grubbed to swap got through all right, way better than city dwellers. In the cities, locals with relatives in the countryside did a lot better than those without any of those links. Have a squiz at that again. City slickers with country rellies, it wasn't having a stash of food, it was about having an auntie on a farm in Brandenburg. Let's head back to Germany. But now it's January 1945, with the Soviet army breaking through the Eastern Front. About 8.5 million ethnic Germans headed west in horse-drawn wagons, copping temps of minus 20 degrees Celsius. They only managed about 10 Ks a day. Meanwhile, the Red Army pushed ahead 30 Ks in Breslau, a city in Silesia. The order to evacuate came way too late, mate. Right in the middle of winter, tens of thousands of civilians hit the road on foot. Thousands froze to death along the roads. Once the Soviets got to Berlin and the Reichsmark became worthless, the American ciggy became the real currency. One Lucky Strike smoke was worth about a full day's wages. A carton of 20 packs could buy enough tucker for a whole week. Martha Hillers, a journo whose war diary came out anonymously as A Woman in Berlin, wrote about the survival sums in the occupied city. Her account was raw and didn't pull any punches. She teamed up with a Soviet officer, swapping company for grub and protection. She recorded, "It takes a wolf to keep the wolves at bay. Mate, that's not the sort of thing a prepper'd say. This is what real survival looks like on paper, and check out what they used for currency." Alright, so it wasn't gold bars or freeze-dried grub. Nah, it was smokes. Small, easy to split, and everyone wanted them. Now let's head to Sarajevo. From April 92 to February 96, the city was under siege for 1,425 days, the longest siege on a capital city in modern warfare. The Serbian forces around the city fired an average of 329 artillery shells every day. At its worst, on a single day, the 22nd of July 1993, they let off 3,777 shells. The National Library went up in flames, and with it 1.5 million books. The city had to rely on water from one underground spring under the Sarajevo Brewery, which was set up in 1881. Snipers were taking potshots at folks carrying water jugs. By December 1993, the average daily calorie intake had fallen below 1,000, and adults had dropped an average of 30 pounds. So, what did they use as money during the siege? The Farmer Collection, a Sarajevo research mob that kept detailed records of everything during the siege, had this down pat: a packet of Drina smokes. These ciggies, made from tobacco rolled in pages ripped from school textbooks, became the standard for swapping. You could swap 1 kilo of raw coffee for a 1-2 kilo propane canister to heat your place. 2 kilos of coffee would get you enough propane to heat your flat for the whole winter. Like the Sarajevo Survival Guide pointed out, antibiotics were worth a couple of local phone calls. This is dead set important. Every time Berlin, Sarajevo, Weimar, the things that turned into currency, were the same. Small and easy to split up. Stuff everyone needed, like tobacco, coffee, sugar, salt, hard foreign currency, and small notes were a lifesaver for those who got out of Sarajevo before the siege shut it down. Those folks had family overseas, held foreign passports, or picked up on the warning signs early. The siege finally ended on the 2nd of May, 1992. The ones who left in March and April had somewhere to go and someone to get in touch with. Get it? The pattern's still the same. First up, you move towards someone you know who's got stuff to swap. Let me take you to Argentina. In December 2001, the country had 5 different presidents in just 12 days. The government froze everyone's bank accounts. That policy was called the Corralito, which means the little corral. People with accounts could only withdraw up to 250 pesos a week. The peso, which used to be worth the same as a US dollar, dropped to just 25 cents. Within a few months, teachers, public servants, and retirees lost everything they'd saved. About 2.5 million Argentines joined barter clubs, swapping goods and services using a local currency called the credito. The people who did well during the crisis, called the credito, were those who kept US dollars stashed at home, out of the banks. Argentines called them colchón dollars, mattress dollars. In Cuba, the ones who got on best had family in the country who could send food, or had a skill that others would trade for. Between 1991 and 2000, the 20s, which Cubans call the special period, Soviet aid stopped, and Cuba's economy shrank by about 35% almost overnight. Daily calorie intake fell from nearly 3,000 to just 18, so people lost about 12 pounds each. Because the government couldn't move people to the countryside and travel was limited, something amazing happened. City folk turned the cities into farmland. By 1995, Havana had 25,000 urban gardens, called organoponicos, which were raised beds on rooftops and vacant lots. By 2002, Cuba was producing 3.2 million tons of organic veggies just from its city gardens. Also, the government imported 1.5 million Chinese-made bikes, mostly the Flying Pigeon brand, because there was no petrol for private cars. Folks either rode bikes, looked after gardens, or faced starvation. Clever Cubans learnt skills like growing plants on balconies, fixing push bikes, and saving whatever resources they could get their hands on. These people managed to eat pretty well. We've got 6 examples: Rome, Weimar, Berlin, Sarajevo, Argentina, and Cuba, covering different times, continents, and triggers. Yet they all follow the exact same pattern. Let me show you the difference. The survivors had 3 qualities, and they weren't the sort you'd find in any catalog. First off, they had a specific destination, not just a concept, but a real name, an address, someone expecting them. The city dweller from Weimar relied on an aunt living on a farm in Brandenburg. The Sarajevo refugee who fled in March had a cousin in Vienna. Melania, a Roman noblewoman, owned properties in both Sicily and North Africa. Lebanese families nowadays often keep a connection to their village up in the mountains. The fact that the grandparents still live there is crucial. A destination isn't just a heading, it's a bond. The second factor was having a skill that the host community needed. The Huguenots are a classic example. After Louis XIV revoked religious protections in 1685, around 200,000 French Protestants left France. Frederick William of Brandenburg welcomed them, as they had expertise in silk weaving, watchmaking, and goldsmithing. By the year 17, a quarter of Berlin's residents were French. Now think about the contrast with the 12 million Germans who were forced out of Eastern territories in 1945. Tradespeople like metalworkers, glassblowers, and carpenters merged into Bavarian country communities over just a few years. People who only had administrative skills like teachers, lawyers, and public servants spent 10 years in camps and barracks, while their hosts resented them. The third quality was a widely accepted tradable commodity, not a gold bar or freeze-dried lasagna, but small items that everyone wanted and could be divided up. Back in 1875, economist William Stanley Jevons nailed the main problem with barter, something he called the double coincidence of wants. Say you've got eggs and I've got shoes, but you don't need shoes right now, and I won't need eggs till tomorrow. That's where commodity money steps in. In 1945 Berlin, cigs did the trick. In 1993, Sarajevo, coffee sorted things out. During plenty of economic meltdowns, Small silver coins of low value were the go-to. In 2002 Argentina, the fix came as US dollars, small notes like 10s and 20s. In Lebanon today, three things count: a destination, a skill. None of these universal trade items are small enough to chuck in a backpack. Two of these things you can't buy at all, while the third, a few $100, can be stashed in a coffee tin under your floorboards. All right, let's get into the nitty-gritty, starting with the bag. I know this idea will keep bugging you till we deal with it, so I'll be straight with you. The realistic bag is like what refugees have actually carried for the last 100 years. It weighs only 15 to 20 pounds, not 60. Here's the proof. The UN did interviews with refugees from Syria, Ukraine, and the Rohingya mob about their border crossings and what they took with them. The answers were pretty much the same and simple. Documents, cash, a phone with charger, and meds. They carried photos, passports, birth and marriage certs, kids' school and vaccination records, plus property deeds or rental agreements. On top of that, they added driver's licenses, keeping photocopies in a waterproof pouch inside the bag, and digital copies on a small USB. Do all this now, before an emergency hits, because in the middle of one, thinking straight is pretty much impossible. Since World War II, anyone without ID papers has been basically invisible to every host country during mass displacements. Food's not the first thing refugees deal with in an emergency, mate. Nah, it's actual cash. About $200 to $300 in small notes, 10s and 20s of the most solid currency you can get. Small silver coins, like half-ounce or quarter-ounce ones, are way more useful than big bars. You can't expect a farmer to break a big silver bar when you're just grabbing a dozen eggs. Third thing, a mobile phone and its charger. Your phone's got all the contact numbers of anyone you might need to get hold of. If you lose your phone, you've lost your whole support crew. Grab a small portable power bank, say 8,000 to 10,000 milliamp hour, and keep it topped up all the time. Honestly, this is the most important bit of tech you'll have on you. Fourth priority, your meds. A month's supply of essential meds: insulin, heart medication, blood pressure tablets, asthma puffers, and seizure drugs. Supply lines for prescription drugs stuff up faster than food supply chains, so always keep a backup stash. Fifth, printed photos. These aren't for sentimental value, they're for ID purposes. Proof that you're the parent of a kid. Proof that the person in the photo is actually who you say you are. These are the bare necessities. Anything else is just a bonus. Next up, water. Roughly 1 gallon of water a day for drinking and basic hygiene. A gallon weighs about 8.3 pounds. For one person, enough water for 3 days comes to about 25 pounds. No other container can hold that. So the real tactic ain't to lug water, it's to bring the gear to purify it. Righto, there's 3 ways to do this. First up, boiling. Bring the water to a proper rolling boil and keep it there for a full 60 seconds. This knocks out all the nasty bugs that can make you crook. If you're above 2,000 meters, boil it for 3 minutes instead. Boiling's been the go-to for yonks, and it's still the most effective. You'll need either a flame source or a compact camping stove with some fuel. Both pack away nicely in a bag. The second method is a hollow fiber filter, like the Soya Mini or Soya Squeeze. These filters set you back between 15 and 30 bucks. In a camping shop, you push water through a membrane. This process gets rid of bacteria and parasites as tiny as 0.1 micron, and the device is nice and small. Weigh in just a couple ounces, it can purify 100,000 gallons before you need to swap it out. Bring one of those with you. The third method is chemical treatment, using aqua mira drops or chlorine dioxide tablets. These are dirt cheap and light as a feather, and they make a good backup for your filter. By using the filter, tablets, and the ability to boil, you can make water safe from any source: a river, a puddle, even a swimming pool. Get it? Start off by carrying 1 liter of water. Find more water along the way. That's the game plan. As for food, you're getting ready for a lot of walking and carrying, which means you'll burn through 3,500 to 4,500 calories each day. What you need is calorie density, and fat's the way to get it. Olive oil's got 8,800 calories per kilo, peanut butter 5,900, nuts about 6,000, and hard cheese 4,000. These things are easy to carry and ready to scoff down, no cooking needed. Traditional pemmican, originally from the Plains tribes of North America, made from rendered fat and dried meat, it gives you about 6,000 calories per kilo and never goes off. The armor company made pemmican for explorer Robert Peary's 1909 Arctic trip. Researchers tested that same batch in 1961, and it was still edible 52 years on. That's some impressive shelf life. Hardtack made from flour, water, and salt-baked rock hard has been used as military rations since the 1600s at least. Royal Navy blokes lived on it for months out at sea, and American Civil War soldiers carried it for years. A museum in Denmark has a piece from 1851 that still doesn't have any mold. Hardtack gives you 4,000 calories per kilo and lasts forever if you keep it dry. Don't bother bringing tin stuff. They're mostly water and bloody heavy. Don't count on having a stove and propane for your plan, because you might not have access to them. Go for high-fat stuff, pick portable gear, and get used to the same grub every day. Next up, barter goods. The bit a lot of preppers forget, but it could save you if you're displaced for ages. You need small items that everyone wants, can be broken up, and are light to carry. Have a think about what history keeps telling us. Cigarettes. Even if you're not a smoker, chuck 2 or 3 cartons in your stash. In every recorded collapse over the last 100 years, cigarettes turned into currency quicker than anything else. You see the same bloody thing happening in Berlin, Sarajevo, and Europe after the war. Okay, so coffee's got to be vacuum sealed in 1 or 2 kilo packs. According to survival guides from Sarajevo, salt was the second most tradable thing, right after ciggies. Sugar, matches, and razor blades. When things go belly up, nobody's got a stash of these, so they disappear in just a few days. Plus, they're small and light to carry. If you can get them legally from a travel medicine clinic, grab a small stash of antibiotics. Fish antibiotics have the same stuff in them, and you can buy them over the counter in lots of countries. Infection's the silent killer when you're displaced. A tooth abscess that goes septic in your blood is just as deadly now as it was back in the year 400. Small notes of cash, especially US dollars, Swiss francs, and British pounds, those are the currencies that have stayed trusted right across every Latin American country. During the collapses in the Middle East and Eastern Europe over the last 50 years. Now, skills. I said before that a skill's the second most important of the 3 things. To give you a clear example, the skills that have always opened doors in rural areas aren't a mystery. First aid and basic wound care. Fixing small engines, welding, carpentry, plumbing, and basic animal care. In a country village, knowing how to help a cow or goat in trouble is worth more than a law degree. Gardening, saving seeds, canning, preserving food, using an amateur radio, butchering, sewing, and basic leather work. A second language, even just a basic working knowledge of the lingo where you're headed. Every single one of these skills you can learn right now. Your local Red Cross branch gives first aid training for under $100. TAFE colleges offer courses in welding, plumbing, and basic electrical work. Reckon if you asked an older neighbor, they'd probably show you how to bottle tomatoes or prep a chook. That sort of knowledge ain't gone anywhere. All it needs is someone to ask for it. When it comes to fitness, I'll be honest, because no one else in the game ever is. If you can't walk 10 miles with a 20-pound pack right now without getting injured, no fancy backpack's gonna save you from the refugee queues of 1,945. They covered 10 to 15 clicks a day over all sorts of terrain in winter. Historians who looked into those columns, especially R.M. Douglas, who studied the post-war expulsions of Germans, noted down exactly who died: the elderly, the overweight, little kids, and the sick. The unfit ones kicked the bucket first. That ain't cruel, it's just basic science. Get walking today. Walk 1 mile every day for a month, then bump it up to 2, then 5, then 10. Crank a 20-pound pack and wear the shoes you'd actually use. This one habit is worth more than any gear you could ever buy. Next up, the destination, and this skill covers everything else. All right, I want you to name 3 people outside your town where you could genuinely turn up. For real, not just on paper. A brother or sister, an old schoolmate, a relative, someone from your church or mosque, a family friend who's got some land, a farm, or a spare room. Give them a bell, don't text or email. Have a proper yarn about how you'd back each other up in a crisis, and go visit them this year. Stay for a weekend, bring something useful, fix something on their property, and learn their kids' names by heart. Daniel Aldrich is a political science professor over at Northeastern University. His whole career's been about figuring out who lives and who dies in disasters. From the 1923 Tokyo earthquake to the 2011 Japan tsunami and Hurricane Katrina. His conclusion, based on more than a decade of peer-reviewed research, goes like this. When it comes to predicting who'll survive, your social connections are way more reliable than any physical factor, even the height of that sea wall during the Japanese tsunami. This is seriously important. That phone call you're making this week? It's the actual foundation for the Jewish refugees. The folks who left Germany between 1933 and 1939 did it because a relative or sponsor in the US or Britain had already signed the immigration papers. Back in 1975, Vietnamese refugees got into the US because a family or church community in Minnesota or Texas had promised to look after them. When Ukrainians arrived in Warsaw in March 2022, every single one came because a Polish family had offered up their spare room. That connection was already there before the crisis hit. The crisis just set it off. So here's what I'm asking you to do this weekend. Write down 3 people from outside your city who you could drop in on without warning. Scribble their names and phone numbers on paper, not just in your phone, then get in touch with one. Talk about your lives, not some disaster. That's the move you gotta make. Everything else can wait a week. If you want to start the physical prep at the same time, walk a mile tomorrow in the shoes you'd pick for a long day. Just 1 mile, and also check your important documents. Passport, birth certificate, kids' records, make sure you know where they are. That's the weekend plan. Less than 2 hours of real work, which is more prep than 90% of this crowd has ever done. Let me go back to the question I asked at the start. Say the power went out tonight and never came back, where'd you head tomorrow morning? I'm hoping that, a year from now, the answer pops into your head quicker. I hope it's a name and an address. I hope the person at that place is expecting you because you've spent the last year looking after that connection. Just like you'd look after a paddock patiently, putting in real effort over the seasons. Reckon your bag's only 15 pounds. Not 50, right? Hope it's got your documents, medications, photos, cash, and a small stash of stuff that last century showed can become currency. If the money system crashes, hope you can hoof it 10 miles with that pack and not get blisters. And hope you get what Melania twigged in 408, and what that Lebanese family in Beirut figured out in 2019. Also, what the Polish family understood in 2022, when they offered their spare room to a stranger. Yeah, the bag's the least important bit. The skills are more important. The destination's the most important of all. That call you make this week, that's what really gets you ready. Business wants you to buy a bag, but history tells you to build a life. Next time, go with the historical record instead. Let me show you something about that. We'll have a look at the skills country folk have always used and city slickers have forgotten. We'll check out what you can pick up in just a weekend. That know-how could make you dead valuable to a family that otherwise wouldn't have any reason to let you in. And we'll suss out where that wisdom's been quietly kept in communities you wouldn't expect. Thanks for sticking around.